Good Shabbos. This week, besides reading the portion of Vayikra, which is the beginning of the book of Vayikra of Leviticus, we also have a special reading, which we say every year before Purim, which is Parsha Zachar, the section of the Torah which tells us we should remember Zachar Asher Asa L'cha Amalek, remember that which Amalek, the nation Amalek, did, which attacked us, the Jewish people, when they left Egypt in the desert. They're the first nation to fight the Jewish people and try to destroy us. We should remember it. And we have a mitzvah, a commandment of Timche Zecher Amalek. We should wipe out the memory of Amalek. Now, this mitzvah is not operative today because there is no nation of Amalek. Whatever existed of that nation is gone, is dispersed, is assimilated into the other nations. There's no one that we know specifically that comes from Amalek. But yet, it still plays an important role in the Jewish life cycle events that we have. Before Purim, we always talk about Amalek. And it's simply understood by most commentators because Amalek represents the evil that's in the world, and that we have a responsibility to destroy, to erase, to eradicate evil from this world. Now, we're going to start Purim tomorrow night, and of course Purim, the enemy is Haman, and Haman is called Haman HaAgagi, the Agagite. And Agag, which seems to be his ancestor, was the king of Amalek, which Saul refused to kill, neglected to kill, and therefore Haman is a product of that. He's a product of the failure of the Jewish people to erase and to eradicate Amalek back in those days. So it still exists, at least existed at the time of the Persian Empire. But to all of us, Amalek exists as I mentioned, as the evil that exists in the world. And it seems to be that the Torah is putting the responsibility on us, on the Jewish people, or all mankind really, to make sure that evil doesn't exist in the world. It says, Timche Zecher Amalek, you, the Jewish people, have an obligation to destroy evil. But the truth is, when you look at the different stories of the Torah, and when it originally told the story, I should say, of the attack of Amalek, it has a different ending. There it says, God says to Moshe, write this down as a remembrance in the book and place into the ears of Yehoshua, of Joshua, Ki macho emche zecher Amalek, I, God, will erase or destroy the memory of Amalek mitachas Shemai, from under the heavens. And it says, it goes on to say, Milchama Hashem Amalek, God himself has a war against Amalek midar dar, from generation to generation. So it sounds like God is the one who's going to erase them. So I think these two notions really are a tension which we all live with today. There are some people who say, leave it to God. God will take care of it. God is Machai Emcha Zecher Amalek. He will fight our battles. And when we were right at the Yam Suf, before the sea split, God said, and Moshe said to the Jewish people, be quiet. God will fight your war. Don't worry about it. That's not your problem. Hashem yilachem lachem v'atem tachrishim. God will fight your war, and you be quiet. Don't even pray. Don't even ask. Don't even plead with God. Just depend on God. So there's this notion that we depend on God. And many people would say everything is in the hands of heaven. And of course, the other approach is that no, it's our responsibility. We can't rely on God to do it. Excuse me. There's a notion of al-samchan al-anes. You're not supposed to rely and depend on miracles. And therefore, we have to fight. And you could argue, God gives us the power to fight. But then we have another verse that says, don't say, Kochi v'otzim miyadi asali esachayel hazeh. There's another verse in the Torah that says, don't say, the power and the strength of our hands has made us strong and given us an army to overpower our enemies. It's coming from God. So which one is it? So I think there's an idea that says when you have when you have two verses which contradict each other, there's a third verse which comes and tells you exactly, tells you exactly how to understand it. And really it's quite simple. Because if you look at the beginning of the story of the attack, what happens? Moshe, after the attack of Amalek, appoints Yehoshua, And he says, B'char lanu anashim, choose for yourself men, b'tzehi lachin ba'amalek, and go fight Amalek. So he's saying, not like it was by the Red Sea when we were first just new out of Egypt and we couldn't handle, we relied on God. Go and fight. You have to war against Amalek. And it says that he was successful, not completely. He didn't completely destroy them. It says Vayachlos Yoshua Amalek v'Amalek v'Charav. Yoshua, Joshua weakened Amalek and his people with a sword. So he told him to choose men. But then when you read the next verse in the Torah, it says, what happened? Moshe and Aaron and Hur, in a sense, his helpers, went with Moshe to the top of the hill, overlooking the battlefield. And when Moshe raised his hands, the Jewish people were successful. They were stronger. When he lowered his hands, that's when Amalek was successful in battle and stronger. And the question is, what does his hands do? So it could be just it's a miracle. He raised his hands just like he raised the staff at the Yam Suf at the sea, or he raised the staff for the 10 plagues. He's creating miracles. But the Mishnah, the rabbis tell us in the Mishnah that's not what's going on. It says, "Do the hands of Moshe make war?" No. But the time when Moshe was raising his hands, the Jewish people looked up and saw his hands, and then they looked up into Shemayim, they looked up into the heavens, and they realized they have to plead and pray to God. So again, you could understand this. You pray to God, and then God lets you win. Or you're saying, no, it's just the opposite. Or not the opposite, it's actually both are included. You have to pray to God. You have to realize that God is behind the history of the Jewish people and the ultimate success of the Jewish people. Because God was the one who says, every generation, God is fighting the forces of evil. It's a miracle that the Jewish people exist. But miracles are not what we should depend on. We have to take the power that God gives us. God put into our nature responsibility and the ability and the ability to survive and persevere and therefore overcome our enemies. And we have to make sure that we take that responsibility seriously. We have to do it. It's not just kochi v'otzav, it's not just the power of my hand. It's God behind it. But God gave us that power. God makes sure that we have the ability. We have to have faith in God, and we have to have faith in ourselves that we have the ability to overcome evil. And therefore, this message of Parsha Zachar and the message of Purim is that no, we will persevere. We will survive. We will be victorious over our enemies. We have the ability and the strength to do so. Will we always? No. But as it says later on in the Torah, there'll always be a sheres haplet, there'll always be something left. We just, not so long ago, 80 years ago, we had the Holocaust. We were destitute. 1 out of every 3 Jews in the world, 2 out of every 3 in Europe were killed, were murdered. There was no hope left for the Jewish people. But then came Israel. God was there. God was there behind us and made sure that with the fact that the Jewish people persevered, moved to Israel, fought a war, made sure that they stood up for themselves, God made sure that that's able to happen. And therefore we have to always be praying to God. We always have to depend on God, but we have to make sure that we use the tools that God gives us. So we have to be thankful to God. We have to be thankful to the soldiers in Israel who are putting their life at stake. We have to pray for both the soldiers in Israel, and we have to pray to God for ourselves that we should be successful. And hopefully Purim is just a sign that we have the ability to overcome everything, no matter how bad the odds are stacked against us. We're able to come out and survive. And hopefully it's not just survival, as I often say. It's then not just to survive, but to thrive. And that's what we hope to do. And Emirat Hashem, God willing, that will happen also today in the war that we are right now involved in. And that it won't just be survival, but we'll come to a place where, again, there'll be peace and security in Israel. Good Shabbos.